Hello, everybody. I'm Madame Sensei. I teach Spanish, French, Japanese, English language arts, and next month I'll be teaching summer health like I always do. And I like to hang out at the Duolingo Educators Network, and I've been a big supporter of Duolingo for many, many years. There's a bunch of clickbaity articles getting passed around us, and I thought I would discuss one of them since we're having a pretty big discussion in the Duolingo Educators Network. Come join us there. There was an interview with Louis von Ahn, which it was a good interview, okay, right here at No Priors. And they were talking about Duolingo in general, and they were also talking about AI because he's made some comments about AI, which of course, to push paper, those headlines are what gets published. All right, so let's talk about my favorite quotes from the interview, okay? He says, the first thing we did that worked was not making lessons 30 minutes long, but 2 minutes long. Yes, absolutely. Now, Louis von Ahn is not an educator, and he's not a linguist. So it's kind of amusing to me that he thinks he has discovered these great truths of the world that we've been talking about for decades upon decades upon decades. All right, so this whole thing about don't make your lessons 30 minutes long. Yes, like anyone who's taken guided language acquisition design classes knows that sweet spot is if you're gonna lecture 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. I've got high schoolers, so I could push them to 15 if I need to. And then you do something with it. You apply it. You work with it. Okay. So your lessons should not be terribly, terribly long because you need to what we call chunk and chew. All right. So yes, he's right about that. Another interesting thing he said is he said he did not expect streaks to be this powerful, and I want to talk about that a bit. And I don't want you to think I'm flexing. I'm not flexing. Yes, I hit the 3,000 day mark last month, and actually it's more like 3,400 days. But we had a power outage, a citywide power outage that lasted for 5 days. I'm not flexing because what I'm doing is I'm modeling for my students. I say, guys, look, I can do 5 minutes of Duolingo a day. You can do 5 minutes of Duolingo a day. If I can carve time out of my busy schedule, me teaching 100 million things, and I've got a family to take care of, and all the other things I have to do, if I can carve time out, you can carve time out. And let me tell you why this is important. This is important because of Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve, and I talk about this with my students all the time. Okay, Ebbinghaus was a researcher in the 1800s, and he did a lot of research and everything, and he determined that you learn something, everything's great, but as the time progresses, you start to forget it unless you can look at it again one time within 24 hours, then you'll remember 80% of what you learned instead of forgetting 80% of what you learned. All right, so we really capitalized on that in my classes, and that's why I turned to Duolingo so that they could get that little bit of practice outside of class. So that's why streaks are really important. That's why we educators talk up streaks, and we encourage our students to use streaks because otherwise they're just going to learn something and forget it. And I tell my students all the time, you can't stay up all night and cram for Spanish and wake up fluent the next day in Spanish. It's slow and steady wins the race. And so the streaks are very important in that. And any educator is going to tell you that. Okay, the next thing he says is that it just turns out that the hardest thing about learning is motivation. Wow, shocker. That's so stunning. Yeah, this is exactly why teaching is an art in addition to being a science, because we try really hard to show the relevance to the students. And this is my metacognition playlist here, where I'm just trying to get the students buy-in so that they understand why they're doing stuff, so that they have that motivation. And for me personally, it's also why I turned to game-based learning. I mean, look at all these groups I belong to. All right, these are all game-based groups because the game-based learning, I find for me personally, helps keep my students motivated. Now, other teachers are going to do things in different ways, but I can tell you this is at the forefront of our mind constantly. And also, coming up, we don't have the Facebook group up yet, Practical and Comprehensible, which is a great conference, always free. and every year they change the Facebook group for the conference, so I don't have the Facebook group yet, but I will be giving a lecture about game-based learning during that. If you want to check it out, it's completely free. I will post here. All right, next thing he says, and I love this. He's absolutely right. We've just got to clock those 500 hours. So he's talking about how many hours does it take to get fluent, or to get at least comfortable enough in the language where you are conversationally fluent. All right. And he's basically talking about seat time here. You just need to study, and it doesn't matter how you study as long as you study. And he had this really nice analogy to going to the gym that you can argue about which is better, the elliptical machine or the exercise bike, but the end result is you have to do one or the other and you'll be fine. Okay, so I really like that. But again, this is not something new to educators. Educators have always known this. Look at how many books I was able to find with just the title 180 Days, and how important it is to absolutely make absolute use of every single day in the class. And we also teach bell to bell. We're not like, oh, I'm done talking. You guys have the next 15 minutes to take out your cell phones and shop on Amazon or check your Instagram or whatever kids these days do. I don't know. We make use of every single moment because we know how precious it is. Next thing he said, and I've got the, if you're interested, the reason I took the screenshots like this is so that you could see the timestamps. And if for some reason you can't read them, just message me in YouTube underneath and I will give you the exact timestamp of everything. He said this rather cynical: people don't read. They just don't. People are lazy. Sorry you feel that way. But again, that gets back to the motivation. That gets back to showing the students relevance. They will read if you give them something that they want to read, that resonates with them. All right. So again, here's my playlist for how I get my students buy-in with metacognition. That's teaching them how to think about their thinking. But this year I was asked to cram lots and lots of students into my language classes so that I could free up an hour and teach junior English this year. And one thing that happened is, we used to teach Frankenstein, and Frankenstein is amazing because it's basically a science fiction novel written when science fiction novels were not being written, and written by a woman. And I was really excited to be teaching this, but the students just aren't finding relevance anymore. They're just not interested in it because Frankenstein to them is a trope. They already know it. And although I think that there's a lot of value in showing them where the trope came from, it's just not resonating with enough students to make it worth their while. So we're trying to think of different ways to teach stuff. So we're no longer teaching Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley's Frankenstein, unfortunately. But, you know, that's the nature of the game. Times change, people change, interest rates fluctuate. The kids today are not interested in the same stuff the kids in my day and age, young whippersnappers, were interested in. So we've got to adapt, and we do adapt. So his supposition that people don't read, it's because you haven't found them the thing that they want to read yet. The interviewer says, what do you know about how people learn that, oh, and look at that, lovely, sorry about the typo. What do you know about how people learn that other humans don't? There, now I fixed it. Okay, so this was a very interesting question because El Señor von Ahn thinks that he's stumbled upon something that nobody else knows. But I'll tell you, every single linguist knows this, and every single language teacher knows this. And he's talking about whether or not Duolingo should make every single question something you know, or every single question something that you're working on. And he says the right thing to do is give you an exercise where you're about 83% correct. He means 83% of the time it'll be in your wheelhouse, and the other 17% you got to work for it. Okay. So in linguistic terms, we call this I+1. I is the amount of language that you know, and +1 is just slightly out of your comfort zone. So the reason is, if you're working at I+0, you're not learning anything. There's nothing new you're not learning, you're not even reinforcing because you already know that stuff. If you're working at I plus 20, that's overwhelming. You have no idea what's going on. It's hard for you to pick it apart. If you're working at I minus 5, that's boring. You're checking out, your eyes are glazing over. So the sweet spot is what we call I plus 1. So congratulations to El Señor von Ahn for discovering what Dr. Stephen Krashen said so wonderfully decades upon decades ago. Other teachers who are not linguists are going to call this the zone of proximal development. Okay, so all educators know about this. And then the next stepping stone of this is what we call this comprehensible input. So the students know enough, and then you can push them just to the next level. All right, so that's one of our great foundational theories of linguistics, and I'm really glad that Duolingo was able to stumble upon that again. It kind of proves all the research that we've already been doing, and I'm glad that they are in total agreement with us because of what they've seen. Oh, and then here's him explaining about the I plus 20 is too difficult and I minus 5 is too easy. So he says it's not 100% because 100% is just too easy, but it's also not 50%. So yeah, good. I'm glad he's discovered that on his own. That's wonderful. And then he said another thing that other humans, quote unquote, don't know is that it turns out that most people don't want to talk to another human in a language that they're not very comfortable with. This is another of our foundational linguistic theories, and we call this the affective filter. Okay, so a filter is something that sifts out bad stuff, right? The affective filter in linguistics terms is that little voice in your head that says, oh, you know what? If I say arre out loud, I'm going to sound really stupid. Everybody's going to laugh at me, and lo and behold, I don't want everyone to laugh at me. So you know what? I'm just not going to say arre out loud. I'm not going to say anything out loud, and nobody's going to laugh at me. And so then you never learn how to say arre because you're too afraid to say it out loud. So we spend a lot of time as educators, not just in language classes, but in all classes, we spend a lot of time lowering that affective filter so that the students are not afraid to participate in the try-fail cycle. But this, again, this is one of our foundational linguistic theories, and you can thank Dr. Stephen Krashen for that. El Señor von Ahn talks about how proud he is that they've done 16,000 A/B tests, and yes, I've been part of maybe 15,999 of them. Yes, those A/B tests are very important, but you didn't really need to do those 16,000 A/B tests because we teachers have been doing those A/B tests for centuries upon centuries, and we already know all that stuff. So, could have saved you some time, perhaps. Now, the next thing is where I'm really going to start to argue with him, okay? He's got this view of education, and he says each teacher cannot give individualized attention to each student. Well, golly, that would make education really stink if that were true. So here's my classroom, 36 students in many of my classes so that I could squeeze in that extra session of English. All right. It's a cramped little place. I've got maybe 148 students this year total. Any good teacher worth their salt is going to try to go out of their way to get to know every single student and know where they are tripping up and where they are succeeding and where we can speed up and where we can slow down. That's where formative assessment comes in. And if you're interested in that, see me at the World Language Teachers Summit and the Teachers Excellence Summit, where I will be talking about formative assessment. Differentiation is a crucial skill for any teacher to have. And I think maybe the best way, as I was trying to think, how can I describe this succinctly, since if you're really interested, you can go see my other lectures at those free conferences. There's this nice little graphic that I'm sure has been peddled around a lot about equality versus equity. Equality is everyone gets a box. Equity is he doesn't need a box because he can see over the fence already. She needs a couple of boxes. He needs a ramp. Okay, and so now everyone can see over the fence. Everyone got to where you wanted them to get to. In the classroom, differentiation is knowing what do I need to give to this student over here and what do I not need to give to that student over there. And this is, again, teaching is both an art and a science. We've got to juggle that, but we do it. Every single one of us goes through a teaching program to learn how to do this. My very favorite discussion of this, the one that really made the light bulb go off over my head, is Dr. Shelly Moore with her, I saw her at a conference, another free conference. I always go to all the free conferences. They're great. She also talked about it at 5 More Minutes, which is her YouTube channel, and I've got it right here, and I'll put the link in the description. But she talks about Dr. Baked Potato, and she basically says, okay, the baked potato is your standards. The baked potato is what you want every student to know, and the students can sprinkle on their own toppings to make it relevant to them. Again, back to that relevance and that engagement and that motivation. So that really made the light bulb go off over my head. Check that out. Then El Señor von Ahn goes on, but the computer can. He says the computer can differentiate and a human being cannot. The computer can have very precise knowledge about what this one student is good at and bad at, that the teacher just has no chance of having because there's 30 students. So again, I've got more than 30 students in each class, okay? And I feel like I do this pretty darn well. I feel like I'm very good at differentiation, and I feel like my colleagues are very good at differentiation, and I feel like a computer is very bad at differentiation, and I could go into all the details of why, but we're at like 15 minutes now, and I try to keep my things short. But basically, AI is only a glorified autocomplete. It's not going to really tell you why you're messing up anything, because the AI doesn't know why you're messing up. It only knows zeros and ones, and it knows that you messed up, but it doesn't know, did you have a spelling mistake? It doesn't know, did you mishear it? It doesn't know, do you have some background knowledge that is different than the background knowledge I was expecting you to have? Or are you lacking the background knowledge, or any number of 100 million things? And we can go, maybe I'll make another video and really dive deep into that. Let's talk about Hattie effect sizes, because John Hattie went through and codified with his meta study of all the studies, and I don't know why I didn't capitalize his name. He codified what's going to give you the most bang for your buck in the classroom, and 99% of these are about differentiation and getting to know your students on a personal level so that you can connect with them better and figure out what each one needs. And here I've made this, oops, let me move this. This is just like the 2 solid ones. You're like, yeah, okay, those 2 solid ones, I can't argue with you about that. But you know what? Every single one of these, you could make the case that they are effective because we as teachers get to know our students as individuals, okay? And then we always talk about the importance of greeting your students at the door, the importance of hallway conversations, getting to know the students as human beings, which I'm sorry, AI can't do. All right, and this is where I got really angry. Everything else I agreed with mostly, or I could see where he was coming from. His idea here, you still need people to take care of the students. I also don't think schools are going to go away because you still need childcare. Is that all schools are? We're just a dumping ground for get rid of your kids? All right, I'm a language teacher, first and foremost. Language is for communication. Language is about talking to each other. If every student was plugged into their own computer, they wouldn't be communicating to each other. They'd just be regurgitating AI stuff, which is all ideas and all sentences and all things that other people have already said. There is no communication going on with AI. For me, as a teacher, I do love Duolingo. I use it for homework. It's only for homework. When the students come into my classroom, I want them talking to each other. I don't want them sitting behind a computer mindlessly doing something one person. All right? I do play computer games in class. You know I love Minecraft. We go on our fake field trips. We build our intricate Spanish gardens, French gardens, Japanese gardens. We move into tiny homes so we can discuss how cultures live in population-pressured big cities. We play Blue Kit. Blue Kit is great. for that drill and kill that we need, and the students can scream at each other in the target language while they're playing it. We do quizzes so that I can get rid of the boring workbook pages. Duolingo for me is only for homework. I am not going to have the students sitting behind a computer doing dull stuff during class, doing solitary stuff during class, when they should be communicating with each other. But Duolingo is great for homework because, again, the forgetting curve. I want them to look at what we did during class one time outside of class. That way it'll get stuck in their head. But the AI is not giving them the communication that they need. So I'm glad that they feel like that Duolingo feels like, yay, we've got the AI to talk to. And I've only been able to do it once because I'm not paying for Duolingo. I don't think any of my students should have to pay for Duolingo. Duolingo's mission was free education. The one time I did the AI thing, the question that Lily gave me was, where do you live? And I said where I lived, but the AI didn't recognize that I was giving a city name that was not in one of the target countries, so misunderstood what I was saying. All right, so it wasn't a real conversation, and it was also very choppy. It was totally not a real conversation. So, sorry I talked on and on and on, but I know a lot of people at the Duolingo Educators Network, we've been talking about this. So I wanted to make a video because that was easier than me trying to type out on my broken keyboard all my thoughts and all the good things I think he said. If you want to argue with me about this, please do. Reach me at the Minecraft Teachers Lounge or the Minecraft Education Ambassadors, Roxem, Duolingo Educators Network, of course. It's Teacher Excellence Lounge, the World Language Teacher Lounge, Quizzes, Game Changers, and AI Certified Teachers. Or as soon as we get the Facebook group up for the Practical and Comprehensible for this year, I'll be there. I'm at studio-nemo.com. Put a comment down here at YouTube. Let's continue the conversation. Let's talk about how we can use Duolingo as a tool, because that's all it is. It's just a tool. It's not going to replace a teacher. It's not going to replace a living, breathing teacher. It's not going to replace a living, breathing activity, conversation, application of the skill. But yeah, it's great for practice. I love it for practice. So thanks for joining me. Hope to talk to you soon.